if you've done this before, right, with groups, and if I can imagine a lot of silence, like as people are trying to.
Hi, Christina, I see you. Okay, so I want to just be grateful that everybody that's here right now. I think this work called The Work and looking at our limiting beliefs is very powerful personal and interpersonal and team and community and agency work that I think if really everybody did this on a regular basis, we would have massive systems change. So Caitlin Frost is here and she'll be guiding us through this call. Caitlin is a process designer, a facilitator, and a coach who works globally with individuals, teams, organizations, and communities engaging in complex challenges and possibilities of our times. She is a steward in the art of hosting, global community of practice, and a deep practitioner and certified facilitator of the work by Byron Katie. Using this practice in her work and life for almost 20 years, she is a passionate learner and contributor to the growing field of practice, working deeply with ourselves and each other to grow our capacity to live in meaningful and sustainable ways. Caitlin lives in Bowen Island in British Columbia, and she's the co-principal of Harvest Moon Consultants with Chris Corrigan. And Chris Corrigan is the gentleman who we did a call with a couple months ago on the chaotic path. And chaotic stepping stones. So they are partners in life and love. And so it's great to have you, Caitlin, here with us. And, you know, we really brought you in because we really feel that there's a deep need as we're doing systems change, having a sense of the fact that when we can shift the beliefs that we have and our mindsets about ourselves and each other, that that is a root of changing the systems that we care so much about and that we see need a lot of support and healing and change. So Caitlin, welcome so much thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Nice. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me in. It's great to have an opportunity. You know, I know we're colleagues appearing in this good work in different places across the continent and around the world. So I'm really happy to be able to join you guys. What I've heard about all the good work you're doing makes me really happy to be able to support it. And, you know, as Dana was saying, I've been working in this field probably for about 25 years now, and working with the art of hosting community in different ways. And it became very apparent to me early in that work, as I was also really interested in looking at mindset and personal work, how important the two were in terms of working together, and how so many of the things that we're wanting to do, the ways we're wanting to show up, the methods that we're using, the participatory work we're wanting to do, how valuable and powerful all that is, and also how much more powerful it can be if we're working with ourselves in a really deep way, and also actually how we can undermine the power of all those methods and intentions if we're not. And so sometimes when we think, you know, why isn't this great method working? Sometimes the place that it's getting stuck is because how we're using it and how we're showing up is limited by the thinking that we have, and some of the patterns that we're bringing in. I'm going to just offer you a moment to take a breath and arrive. Part of what we're talking about today is how can we be present? You know, how can we show up with a state of presence of mind and self that allows us to lead and participate in this work in a good way. And at the same time, you know, everybody I know that does this kind of work has a million things going. And so we actually have to make an effort to land where we are. So just going to give you a minute to arrive here, think a little bit about why it's important for you to be here today, why this topic of limiting beliefs might be helpful to you in your own work and practice. Through some of the lenses of the art of hosting that I know some of you have done, and the systems change work you're doing, you know, we know that we're facing big complex challenges. We're working with issues like health and poverty and climate change. We're trying to build community. These are all things that are complex. And we know we need to show up and lead in a different way. We need to host and participate in a different way. We talk a lot about needing to co-create and work with our differences, and how we show up in that makes a difference, not just in that way that, like, of course it matters how people show up, but it actually makes a difference for the work that's able to happen, depending on how we're able to show up. And so that's why today we're focusing on this area of self-hosting and personal practice, and particularly looking at limiting beliefs as a powerful practice in that domain. A quick agenda piece. We're going to actually spend the first part of the call just talking about and exploring the whole idea of working with complex challenges, and why do we need to be doing this limiting beliefs type of personal work. How does that connect in with the other layers and levels of work and system change? And how do we bring a depth of reflection and an understanding of stories and how our mind and our nervous system works? How do we bring that into the practice? And then I'm actually going to share with you a tool called The Work of Byron Katie. We know when we're working, when we're wanting to work at a deep level in a way that makes an impact, we need tools and practices for that. It's not enough just to say, I'm going to be aware. It's not enough to just set an intention to have a different mindset. We actually, it takes some work, and we need some tools to do that. And I've found this particular tool of The Work to be surprisingly and deeply powerful, both for just our own self-development, but also for helping us get at some of those underlying patterns that show up in our own minds, and that also show up as collective storylines, that we all carry, that can hold systems in place. So we're going to do an exercise around it today. This is going to be, hopefully you have a pen and a piece of paper, and you're ready to dive in. I'm not going to talk the whole time. You're going to have a chance to think of something from your own experience and work with that. And then we'll have a chance to just talk about how else you can apply this tool. It's a tool and practice with a simple form that you can then apply in lots of different ways. And so having one experience through one particular focus today, I'll point you to the resources so that you can actually start to practice with it yourself in some different ways. And we'll also just have a chance, after we've looked at the application of the work through some specific personal piece, and we've had that learning experience together, we'll take some time at the end also to just have a bit of a conversation about, what are we learning through our own work that helps us understand and act in systems change, in a more effective way. And then we'll be done at about 2 o'clock Pacific time. So thank you for making some time today. It's good to practice together. And also, if you are, I know this call is being recorded because not everybody can make the timing today. And so if you're listening to this as a recording, I do recommend that you have a pen and paper, and that you can just pause the recording as you're going and follow along with the exercises and do the exercises yourself. This limiting beliefs work is not a spectator sport. We all have, if we have minds, we have limiting beliefs. And so, getting in and working with your own is the place that it's going to be powerful and impactful for you. But it's also the place where you're going to actually get the learning about how limiting beliefs function. You can't really learn it from the outside. And that's why today we're going to focus on, most of the time, we're going to focus in on the personal practice of working with your own mind and your own limiting beliefs. From that place, you'll have more compassion and understanding about how human minds work and how that might inform what's going on for other people when you're hosting and working with others as well. A quick just set of principles. As I mentioned, the session is being recorded, and that's in service of sharing what we learn here and making it available to other people, I think, in your community of learning, to help just amplify the work that everybody's doing. If you're on the call, sharing is valuable. It's helpful to share a little bit of what you're learning and noticing, but just do that within the comfort level that you have, in sharing those pieces with others. And I often find we will be working with specific stories and examples, but you can just leave names off. And I find it's actually quite surprising how very quickly, when we take a name off, our stories become, like very common. It's like, oh yeah, I've got that same thing happening as well in my team. And I've got that same thing happening as well in this working relationship with somebody. And I've got the same fears about this big engagement I'm going to do. And once we pop the names off, it can actually be very valuable without feeling like you're going too much into the confidentiality of your own work. And then a piece that I'll say now, and I'll probably say it again at the end, the work is a self-inquiry, self-hosting practice. And so we also get to practice kind of doing our own work, and not jumping into giving advice and problem solving and figuring out what everybody else should be doing. Of the many limiting human patterns, that's one that runs pretty strong for lots of people, that it's much easier for us to look and see what other people should be doing differently, and what their limiting beliefs are. And so I just invite you as a first pattern to notice and step out of, as we, when we dive into the exercises today, if you feel that leaning, just to bring yourself back to your own work. There's so many helpful layers. When we think about repatterning some of these limiting beliefs and patterns we have, every step of this work actually stretches that in some different ways. So just quickly, when we're thinking about the space that we're in with the complex challenges that we're facing, and I know that in the work that you guys have been doing, you've done some work talking about, why do we need to have dialogue, and why do we need to co-create things, and that we need to have different perspectives. We need to have people with perspectives different than our own. We need to be aware of that. We need to invite that in, that we actually can't solve these problems without that. And yet those things aren't that easy to do always. There's a certain territory where we can feel comfortable in how we show up in a conversation or stepping in to host it. We might be really comfortable co-creating with certain people and maybe not others. Or, if everybody's agreeing with me, it's much easier to co-create. If I'm not fearful of certain outcomes, it's much easier to co-create. Maybe I'm comfortable with different perspectives up to a point, but when it starts to threaten my values, or it's something I don't understand, or it looks like it's going to get in the way of something I want, or something that I think is important, you can feel where we start to clench up, react. And that's kind of like the space where suddenly these things that we need to be doing to be working in this space aren't so available to us. We also know from this work that there's lots of uncertainty, there's lots of change happening, there's lots of discomfort. And so our capacity for that needs to be strong, and we need to continue, we need to be able to continue to grow it. And again, that's an area of practice. I can't just say, I'm gonna be comfortable with uncertainty. It's like all the human, if you look back at all the human stories of the world, way back to times anybody was writing stories down or telling stories, the humans have been struggling with uncertainty and wanting control and wanting to be able to understand, and struggling with change and trying to get out of discomfort. And so we're in a long lineage of being stretched and limited in these zones, and yet this is the territory that we're really called to be able to work in. And so that's again, how we show up matters in those spaces, and how do we grow our capacity for that. I wanted to, without going into it too deeply, just talk a little bit about the fourfold practice of the art of hosting. If you've been in the art of hosting, you might recognize this. If you haven't, that's okay. We can still just situate the personal practice, the hosting yourself, the idea of focusing on presence, which I think of as like having our whole learning self available. Just to situate that in all the other pieces that we're doing when we're doing systems change work and we're working in complexity. One of the things that I think can be sometimes a limiting or shadow side of personal work is separating it from our voice and our action in the world. And the idea that we can just go away and do our personal work by ourselves, and that will take care of everything. And so I think it's important to do the personal work, but it's also important to see how doing our personal work, participating in collaborative work and conversation, stepping sometimes into leadership and hosting other people, and then working with others to actually co-create the changes that we want in the world, that those 4 pieces all work together, and that we need to be tending all 4 of them. You know, often we'll gravitate to one or the other. You know, people often just gravitate to leadership. You know, we just need to lead. And so it's helpful to see that in this space, but we also don't want to only gravitate to personal work. The piece about the hosting yourself and the personal work, though, is that all 3 of the others don't work that well if you're not able to be working with yourself, and if you're not working with your own limiting beliefs and your own assumptions and your own bias and your own fears, then the way that you show up in those other 3 folds can be at best limited and kind of at worst actually harmful or destructive. It's not that we mean to show up in harmful and destructive ways, or ways that shut things down or you know, cause harm to other people, but it can happen out of this space of limiting beliefs. So just thinking about how you know, your own personal practice can affect how you listen, how you speak, how you show up when you're joining into some work in this area, in your field, how they can affect how you step into leadership and host others, and then where you also might be limited and need to do some work in stepping into meaningful co-creation, giving up some power, you know, allowing other people's ideas in, not being as attached to the outcome being exactly what you want to. You know, these are all places of like actually quite intense practice if we're going to do them deeply and do them in the way that we need to change the systems, you know, in the ways that we want to. The self-hosting personal practice, and I would say, you know, we're focusing on the limiting beliefs part of it, but it's part of a field of, you know, how we focus on and work with ourselves. There is a piece of it that is about our well-being. You know, we can get really stressed out and really quite unwell sometimes in trying to stay in challenging and difficult territory with high conflict and uncertainty and differences. People burn out, you know, or can not be well with that. And so our own patterns around that can be really helpful to work with ourselves in a way that helps us to be well in it and helps it to be sustainable for us to stay in our work. That's a really important piece. But often that's kind of where it ends. So sometimes people aren't doing it at all, and you know, it's good to bring it in. But I also think the personal work often gets limited by it only being about me trying to reduce my stress, and it's only about me trying to be well. And as much as those things are valuable, you know, as leaders and participants in this work, there's other really important components to the self-hosting piece, and that I think the limiting beliefs work supports in a deeper way to bring these other layers in. You know, so one is just developing and accessing the capacities that we need. You know, what kind of capacities do I need to lead and show up well in this work? And we're gonna dig into that a little bit shortly. There's also a piece of it that I hold as a responsibility. You know, if I'm hosting, if I'm leading something, if I'm the facilitator, if I'm the funder, if I'm the inviter, if I'm showing up in any kind of way that has power in the system, I believe I have a responsibility to actually actively look at my limiting beliefs, to actually work with where could I be carrying bias and assumptions, where is my fear setting me up to react in ways that shuts other people out or shuts other people down or shuts the process down, makes me grab control, you know, all of those kind of things that we don't set out to do, but that can play out. And when we are in a position of power, whether it's because of our role or because of other privilege we might be carrying, I believe the work and the self-hosting work with limiting beliefs can really like help me to take responsibility for doing my own work around that. And it's not just about where am I stressed and helping to reduce my stress. It's about looking for where might I be showing up with limited thinking and therefore, you know, behaviors and actions that impact other people or impact the work we're trying to do in a limiting way. And then the last piece, which I think Dana referred to at the beginning, you know, as well, is, and we've heard it, there's like Einstein quotes, like there's, you know, quotes everywhere around it. You know, we're going to change the system. We need to change our thinking. If we have our thinking the way it is, we're going to keep creating the same thing. And that is like so true. And we can see it in many places. But it's actually we don't have that many practices to actually get in there and change our thinking. Like, how do we do that? And how do we do that in a really focused and deep way? And how can we get tools for doing that into our own hands? There's certainly some dialogue tools that help that to happen. But we do notice we can get pretty stuck and defensive or unaware of our own thinking. And, there's a little bit, having people that point that out to us is a little bit helpful, but often is not enough to actually get in there and shift it and change it. So, this area of personal practice, I think, is about all four of these things. Helping us to increase our self-awareness. And that's not just a surface level of self-awareness. The work that we're going to do with the work today really actually helps us to become more aware of how our thinking works. What am I thinking? How does it work? How can I see my own thinking in more detail and develop the capacity to actually watch my mind and work with it in a deeper way? And then also, how can I see how my thinking connects to my emotions and my actions and how I show up? How can I become more aware of that? And then how can I also actually inquire into that and start to shift it in places where that I can see it's limited or it's not aligned with how with my values or how I want to be showing up. Once I'm aware of that, the work takes us to a next level of now I can actually do something about it. I can actually dig in there myself. And I invite people with the work, just as a principle, as a way of working, to be both compassionate and rigorous. And I find that the work as a tool allows me to do both those things. I have to make an intention to come in it with some self-compassion, because when we start to look deeply at our limiting patterns and some of those pieces, it can be pretty uncomfortable. It's pretty personal, it's pretty uncomfortable. And there's a lot of hanging out in that kind of warmth of humility, or sometimes even that sinking feeling of seeing ourselves through a lens that maybe isn't that aligned with how we want to be and what we value. And so bringing some compassion to that actually helps us to learn and grow, because it's shaming ourselves. It can get uncomfortable, and I think sitting in the humility is helpful. But actually, shaming ourselves, we can't learn. Our learning system shuts down when we do that. So bringing some compassion, but also some rigor to it. So I think you'll see as we start to work with the tool of the work, we really lean in there, have a good look. The questions of the work, we can really stretch into them to look more deeply at ourselves and the thoughts and patterns that we hold in a way that allows them to shift at a deeper level. When we talk about leadership today, in a few moments, I'm going to invite us to do a little bit of reflecting on the whole, idea of our leadership. We're really in the art of hosting world talking about hosting and really stretching this idea of leadership to not just be positional leaders, not just be, am I the chair? Am I the facilitator? Am I the president or the director, or, in all of those roles could be, but also just looking for, anybody who's showing up to contribute, anybody who's positioned to influence the system or make an impact from anywhere in the system. And what we know about complex systems is that the system can be moved and shifted, in helpful or non-helpful ways from anywhere in the system. And so as you're reflecting on your own leadership, with this work, it's pretty broad. See where you find yourself positioned in that way. Cool. So before I go to that piece, I'm going to invite you in a moment to reflect on some different stories that'll just take us a little bit into the different capacities that we're looking for when we're wanting to work in complex change work. But I wanted to share a little story of my own before we jump in there, and thinking about the fourfold practice that we were just talking about as well. Chris and I were working on a project quite a number of years ago where we had been invited in by a colleague of ours to work in a small community where they were having a lot of suffering and huge issues in the topic area of care for children and child protection. And she reached out to us to say, you know, we've been working for many years, you know, on this issue in this community, and it's just dire. Like, you know, children are dying and suffering, and there's three sort of bodies that are responsible for the care of children. There's like a community body, there's a culture-based body, and then there's actually two levels of government, you know, involved in this issue, and nobody talks to each other. You know, there's long history of trauma in the community. There's a huge history of, you know, mistrust, and yet there's this issue at the center that's not getting better. And, you know, the only way they can address it together is to come together and talk to each other. And we've failed to actually be able to hold a dialogue with these four, you know, representatives from these four groups of people over many years. And she actually used the words, you know, we've like chewed up a whole truckload of facilitators, you know, in the process. And will you help us? Right? It's like, sounds like an invitation that, you know, many of us would just want to flee from. And I certainly had the fleeing impulse myself, and just thought, oh my gosh, like, you know, what are we gonna be able to do here? But was drawn by the need, you know, the need in this community, the need of these children and families, and being able to see that it was very hard for these people to come together. And so we agreed to go in and work and do what we can. And I won't go into all the details of the design, and I could tell a very long story. But we did, you know, what we do in this work. We talked to people, we had phone calls with people. It was very unsuccessful trying to get everybody on a planning call together, which we would normally want to do. People were showing up or not showing up. There was like lots of patterns even within the system already that made it hard to even plan something. And we used all our decades of experience with, you know, how to plan for diverse perspectives and different conversations and tough issues. And, you know, we have methods and chaotic design and, you know, participatory methods and all of that stuff, which is super helpful and valuable. But it was also still feeling just like the level of uncertainty was very high. And conflict was already happening before we got there. We had to travel many hours to get there. And as we were on our trip to get up there, my partner and I decided that we both felt very stressed about it. And we're feeling like we don't, you know, what are we going to do? There's going to be all this conflict, and, you know, how are we going to handle that? And what we decided to do, rather than to continue to try to design and problem solve, is we decided to use the work. We decided to do the limiting beliefs work and look at what are our own limiting beliefs about the situation? Who are we judging? What are the assumptions we have? What are the fears that we have going into this? And as I'll show you with the process later, we identified them, we wrote them out, we used the questions to actually do our own work. We facilitated each other, you know, while driving. I'm not suggesting you drive and do the work, but we facilitated each, and the amount of learning and intangible shift that happened for us by working with our own limiting beliefs there, in retrospect, after the 2-day meeting, was the thing that helped us most. It was good that we had the methods. It was good that we had the understanding that we have about those pieces. But I could absolutely feel multiple times during that meeting when people did shout at each other, people stormed out, various things happened. My ability to hold space, to tweak to like discern and tweak the design and know when to speak up and stand back and know when to listen and to allow conflict to happen or to tuck it in. I mean, I couldn't describe it all, but I could feel all the way through where the work that we had done in the car on the way up was actually what allowed us to provide leadership and hold space, and really listen. And the 2 days of meetings happened. It's the first time, I think, in, you know, recorded history when these four groups of people mostly stayed in a room together for 2 days, and some conversation was able to start. And so just like noticing, you know, just from my own experience there, and we do that all the time. Whenever we're stepping into work like that, doing the limiting beliefs is a huge part of our practice for doing that. And you can always see and feel the helpful impact of that, and where the methods alone wouldn't have been able to create and hold the container that we needed for the work. Places where I would have missed things, or I can see where I would have reacted differently out of a judgment or an assumption, that I was able to react in a different way because I'd questioned and worked with it myself ahead of time. So going to just invite a little bit of reflection of a few stories for you. You know, if you're here live, you can just reflect and write a few things down here. If you're listening to the recording, I encourage you to do the exercises as well. Take some time to reflect on your own story and write a few things out as we go along. And we'll just do a light touch on this before we head into teaching you how the work works. So for the first piece, I want you to think of a person whose leadership you admire. You know, leadership defined how I was saying it earlier, and specifically see if you can draw from your memory a time where there was a challenging situation. You know, we get into lots of challenging hosting and collaborative work situations where you saw this person show up with some kind of hosting or leadership that actually made a positive difference, like had some positive influence, you know, where you're like, whoa, this is really challenging. Like, oh, look how that person showed up. And you've like watched a little bit of mastery of some other person. Could be something where it was like really noticeable. It's a big meeting and they're the facilitator and they did some like beautiful, brilliant thing. Or it could just be something subtle. It could be watching the quiet leadership of someone at a cafe table or a dinner table or in a conversation, seeing somebody show up with a kind of presence and hosting that made a difference. And just take a moment to picture that situation in your mind and picture that person. See if you can remember what it felt like. You can know you've got like both feet in the door of the movie and the memory when you can kind of feel it. There's that person, there's that challenging situation. Just kind of like watch that person. Notice how they're showing up. What are they doing? What's happening? And then just write down a few qualities that you notice that person is showing up with. What are some of the qualities as you observe them they're showing up with that seem to be helpful in that situation? Anybody game to just share out a few things? What are you noticing? What qualities is this person showing up with? And just unmute and say a few out.
I can start. The words that came up were self-reflective. I liked the compassionate and rigorous. That was present. Mm-hmm. And they were present, very present.
Thank you. Anybody else? What did you notice?
Transparent, respectful, accountable.
Thank you. I noticed curiosity. Person seemed like calm but present, and respectful but direct. And from anybody, you can reflect for yourself, and then anybody who wants to share anything out. Like, what did you notice the impact of that was? This was a challenging situation with different people trying to have a conversation or trying to do something together. What difference did it make? Like what positive impact or influence did that person have by showing up that way? Is there anything you noticed that was the effect of that?
I can share. It was very impactful to see somebody question the power dynamics, in particular from one person, in such a skillful way that was vulnerable and that was super respectful, and that helped shift things. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Right, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it doesn't go so well. So somehow how that person was able to show up was able to shift things.
The vulnerability was key.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Maybe one more person, what you noticed, the impact of that was?
For me, I think it created a sense of trust. And so I think people already had assumptions of what was going to happen, or were already thinking through how they were going to need to fight back. And it just, in creating that sense of openness, it was kind of like setting the example and allowed that space for other people to open up to possibility and opportunity.
Nice. Yeah, interesting. There's like a fight back pattern ready to launch. And then like something happened here and that pattern shifts to something else. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so you can kind of keep that in the back of your mind. We're going to pull up another situation. So this time I want you to think of a specific challenging situation, kind of like same deal. But think of a time that you showed up in a way that had some kind of positive influence or impact. This was like good leadership moment for you by your own standards here. And you could see that it was like had some positive influence. And picture the situation and the people, like let yourself really lean into it. Remember what it felt like, what was going on around you. And then feeling yourself shift into whatever hosting or leadership like move is happening there for you. And then just like observe yourself. How are you showing up? What are you doing? What's showing up in you that's helpful in this moment, or is providing some helpful leadership here? And then same thing, just as you reflect, write down a few of the qualities that you noticed showing up in yourself in that situation. Anybody game to share? What did you notice? What showed up in you that was like some positive hosting or leadership qualities in that situation?
The moment I'm thinking of is a time when I was able to really be present and to have the self-awareness of where my triggers were coming from, so that I could then have choices and choose to not allow those triggers to hijack me, and to choose to see the choices and then act accordingly, knowing what ultimate impact I wanted to have.
Nice. Oh my gosh, isn't that so helpful?
Yeah. Creating that space to know where you want to go, and realizing this piece here isn't going to get you there. So what other ways, and how do you reroute?
Yeah, and your mind was able to do that in that moment, right? Yeah. It's like, it sounds like it was fully online. You know, often I think when we talk about what does it mean to be present, You know, one of those things is like you're fully online. Some of those thinking capacities that you're using, those are pretty high level, right? I'm able to kind of see the whole thing. I'm able to like see what's going on for me over here, but I'm not caught in it.
Right.
I can see the direction, right? You're using all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, phew, right?
An out of body experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? Be one other person. What did you notice? What qualities showed up in you?
I can share. I was leading a process with a group of people, and one of the people had been questioning my leadership from the beginning, showing it in many different ways. And I saw myself triggered in a certain situation, and I was able to not react and somehow do some move to get the attention away from that dynamic and in an effective way. And it was a breakthrough for me.
Nice. Yeah, doesn't that feel great when that happens? When you're actually like when we're able to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in either of your situations, what was the positive impact of that? Like, how was that helpful to the situation, to you, to what the work that was happening, to the other people? What was the benefit of you being able to show up that way?
For me, it totally shifted a relationship and broke a pattern.
Yeah, for me, it preserved the wholeness of what was happening for everybody. There didn't need to be static at that moment, really. And I also discovered my capacity to not get hooked by being questioned directly.
Right. Yeah. So those are like super helpful things, right? When we think about the spaces that we're working in, the conversations that we're trying to have, the, you know, systems that we're trying to change, the perspectives we're trying to bring in, to be able to be doing that sounds like and moving big patterns that could really limit the work, right? Really helpful to be able to do that. You're able to access that place in yourself. And it sounds like for both of you, you were aware that you had some triggers hanging out there, right? Which, you know, in the language, we'll look at it later when we're looking at the work. Those would be places where you've got beliefs and patterns around certain beliefs that you know are charged for you, and that if you were to get caught in them, like things could go not in the direction that is aligned for you or what you're wanting, but you were able to see them and not get caught in them. And that's like really helpful spaces. Yeah. And for everyone else, just thinking about, you know, looking at your own qualities and looking at how your ability to show up that way impacted the work, impacted the quality of the dialogue, allowed certain things to happen, not just in that moment, but sometimes with big patterns like that. It's like, wow, a pattern can run through the work, you know, in a community or in a team of people can, over a long period of time, really limit the work and harm relationships and all that kind of thing. So when you're actually able to get at a pattern like that and shift it, that's not a small thing. That's pretty huge. Okay. So last one. So we're going to think of another story, again, challenging kind of hosting leadership situation with people, this kind of work that we're doing. And I want you to think this time of a situation where you did not show up with like, this was not your great leadership moment. Somewhere where you showed up in a way that was like not really aligned with how you'd wanted to, or it didn't have a great effect or a great impact on the group. Maybe like took things in the direction that is not what you like wanted or valued. You know, I think all of us in this work, I've done this exercise probably with thousands of people all over the place. And there's never anybody in the room who has not had moments where their hosting or their leadership didn't show up for them in a great way. And so just with some compassion, but also some just like clear looking, think of a situation where it just didn't show up great and it did not go great. Went kind of poorly. And picture the situation and the people. Let yourself lean into the uncomfortable feelings, right? It's like, we do not like that. It's uncomfortable when it's happening. It's uncomfortable to think about it. But just practicing hanging out in that a little bit. And then just watch yourself. There you are. Remember what it felt like. have a look at how you're showing up and what you're doing. And just notice what are some of the qualities, right, that are showing up in you in that moment. Some of the like not so helpful qualities that you're embodying and acting out of in that situation. So just take a moment to find it, have a look, and write down a few qualities. Anybody game to, I'll share mine first on this one. So I just have a particular meeting in mind where we were trying to hear from everybody, and I was hosting the meeting and one person was dominating with a lot of stuff. And I would say some of the qualities that showed up for me in this situation were that I'm not so proud of, and were not so helpful, was avoiding, appeasing, judging in my head, a little bit of sarcasm. And then I noticed I got really controlling. By the end of the meeting, I was like not very participatory. I grabbed the reins, and got, I think the whole last part of the meeting was mostly just entirely me talking. Yeah, not great. Anybody else? What did you notice showed up in you in that situation?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my audio. I just want to make a comment, like with each one of these, how in an instant something comes to mind. I mean, I didn't have to like search for examples where sometimes, but for whatever reason, what came to mind is when 9/11 happened that day, right? I was the director of a health department actually here in Washington. And I don't know why, but I like hid in my office. Like I was so freaked out, and I had staff that I realized later that were also freaking out about what was happening. And in retrospect, I was like, what was I doing? And that I wasn't really there for that situation. It felt terrible. Granted, it was a terrible thing, but just given the role that I was playing, I needed to show up. Like I needed to be there and, bring people together and kind of deal with the situation. And anyway, it just, for whatever reason, that came to mind. And so anyway, it was not a great experience, and I felt terrible about it.
Yeah, so. I mean, we do, right? Because it's not aligned. Yeah. It's not like you thought, today I will hide from my leadership in a big, difficult situation, right? It's not what we want. It's not, but there it is coming through, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Anybody else? Maybe one more person? Game to share some of your unfortunate qualities that moment.
Well, I know, it's probably one of those things that every now and then will resurface within me, and it's something that I feel from the inside out, because I know it was one of those leadership moments where, and I never want to repeat that. And so when I really think about it, the way you were asking, there was a feeling of impatience and a need to like respond and fix it instead of problem solve it. So I think that's what I really felt.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and you can kind of feel how that just comes on, right? I mean, when we talk about complex systems and emergence, right? We're a complex system, and stuff's emerging, right? Like impatience is emergent. You know, the feelings that would lead me to hide are emergent. They're not just a thought. They're not something that I necessarily set out to do. And then presence can be emergent, or curiosity can be emergent, or some of the things from those other stories, those are also emergent. So, you know, part of what we're looking at is, you know, the complex system that is me can show up in all of these different ways. You know, and we have a sense it's going to be helpful to ourselves in this work and to the things that we know are helpful and the values that we hold around it to be able to show up more like story 2. You know, the past story where we noticed we were showing up in a way that really was aligned and had a positive influence in the situation, and less like story 3. But it's you know, we need to work with ourselves to be able to do that, because nobody sets out, or certainly it's very unlikely that we set out. You know, I didn't set out to be controlling and appeasing and sarcastic by any means, you know, in that situation. And yet there it is. I value the opposite of those things. I teach the opposite of those things, right? And then there I am in an important moment. And that's I can't access that other stuff. That's what's coming through. And I can't just tell myself to access it, because I'm a complex system. It's like not online at the moment. You know, so when we think about some of the rigorous self-reflection and self-hosting practice, that's some of the stuff we're trying to get at, trying to like get into the fabric of our own patterns. And the way into those is through our stories and through our thinking. That's where we can get at it. You know, self-awareness is really helpful and valuable to a point, but simply being aware of something at a kind of surface level is not enough. You know, how many times have you yourself perhaps received feedback about something and not been able to shift it, or not been able to even see when you're doing it? And you watch other people do that. We give them feedback and they keep doing the thing. You know, interrupting people, or being controlling, or, you know, operating out of bias, whatever that is. And it's like, hey, we've told them about it. Why aren't they stopping doing it? We've received the feedback. Why can't we stop doing it? Knowledge and skills, valuable, right? And when we can access them, they're really helpful. But as we've noticed in the difference between the second and the third story, we can't always access them. I wasn't behaving that way because I didn't have the knowledge and skills not to behave that way. You know, I teach this stuff. You know, I have lots of practice with it. And that's helpful to a point. But another territory overrode that, and will sometimes override that from my own thinking and patterns. And so it's really valuable, but not quite enough. And the same with positive intention. Really good to go into things with positive intention. It can get us a certain distance. It's good to know what our intention is. Beautiful and powerful and helpful. But our limiting beliefs and our thinking, our fears and our assumptions can override positive intention, really eat it for breakfast, you know, sometimes. I know with my third story there, my meeting, I went in with like really good intention. I didn't intend to interrupt people or be sarcastic or take control or silence anybody's voice, or, you know, I didn't intend to do any of those things. But like, what are the patterns that override that? And so, you know, as we head into looking at this tool of the work and working with limiting beliefs, that's some of the territory and like a kind of rigorous personal practice piece that we need a way to get at. You know, and I found this work to be really powerful as a way to get at that, both from noticing places that I'm stressed and stuck, but also from actually, you know, if someone gives me feedback, I can use the work to follow it, to say, you know, what am I thinking and believing? And I show up that way. Very quick, I sent you this diagram to print out as well. And I'm not going to spend ages on it, but sometimes it's helpful to have a visual as we head into working with the limiting beliefs, to kind of see that we're not working with limiting beliefs is not an intellectual process. Although we're working with our thinking and our mind, we're actually using it as a doorway to get into the whole system of how we feel and how we react and the types of behaviors that emerge, you know, out of us. when we're thinking a particular way. And so just as a very quick look at the diagram with the circles here, you know, stuff happens, or we think something's going to happen. Our mind makes meaning about that, which means it, you know, creates assumptions because it's deciding things mean certain things. You know, it creates stories out of those beliefs. And it also has a very important job to try to predict what's going to happen. And so it gets busy doing that. And the limiting beliefs area of thought, you know, I purposely don't call it negative thinking, because the focus more is on how does it limit me, whether as opposed to is a belief positive or negative. We're really focusing more on when I hold on to it this way, what effect does it have? You know, does it have a limiting effect? And we're going to work with one little piece of it today, but in that whole area, we can work with judgments, assumptions, fears, blame thinking, you know, can be a huge pattern in our work that can be very limiting. Shaming type of thinking, being attached to outcome, you know, can connect to a lot of the control patterns. I need it to turn out a certain way. You know, where we're trying to be genuinely co-creative around something, but we're attached to it going a certain way. That can be very limiting. I can't co-create if I'm overly attached to one particular outcome, or attached to being right, or being comfortable, or, you know, whatever that is. There's some interesting exercises you can do around things should or shouldn't be certain ways, people should or shouldn't do certain things. That's an interesting way to get at judgment as well, and some control patterns. And then just the big loop of cynical thinking, you know, nothing will ever work, nothing's going to change, we've done this before. We can cycle that on the whole thing when we get overwhelmed working with big complex problems. And we can also do that about groups of people, end up with some cynical thinking about groups of people. Those are all different kinds of thoughts, but, you know, something happens, we have a particular thought or belief that we lock onto that comes from that situation. You know, I might, you know, have a thought that somebody doesn't respect me. I immediately have the emotions that go with that thought, and then I can head into my fear-based reactions, you know, the fight and flight and freezing, the appeasing that showed up a lot in my story, or controlling behavior. Those reactions often come in with the limiting beliefs because they're fear-based. And then we just kind of loop around, often adding things. And so we're already in that fear-based space. Our mind is, you know, starting to, some of our higher thinking starting to go offline. Now things feel even more stressful. And you'll notice you probably, like, that person didn't respect me. Now they're not going to listen to me. I'm not going to get my voice in. And then the project's going to go badly. And then I'm going to, you know, lose my job. And we can, like, really loop around until we're in this very clenched place. And that's where a lot of the, you know, emergent qualities that we were talking about in our third stressful story there, that's when we start to show up that way. And that's what we're seeing. It's like, you know, we won't go ton into all the neuroscience now, but like the way that our mind is functioning by that point is very narrow. There's actually stuff that we can't see, can't hear. We can't do the big picture thinking. You know, that great story too that both of you shared, where you were able to, like, see your triggers and see which direction you wanted to go, and like, how's this all going to play out? It's like that part of your brain's not working very well at this point. And so we get caught in this loop. And so, you know, just noticing when we think about that, that's where our internal patterns are getting stuck. With the work, we can enter through the limiting beliefs. So that's like a place we can enter that system, a place that we can work with it and start to understand and work with ourselves and get a much deeper level of self-awareness that way. I will share this slide with you, but just noticing, like, I've talked a little bit about all the different places that limiting beliefs just limit us, limit our ability to do, you know, all of these things that we really are so helpful to us and actually needed if we're going to be doing, you know, good change work and connecting and thinking in different ways. So I'm going to spend this second stretch of time. I'm going to give us a little introduction now just to the work as a tool. We've actually been talking about pieces of it all as we go along, but I'm going to kind of bring it into, like, here's the simple structure of the practice. And then we're going to jump into an exercise and give you a chance to practice with it and use it a bit. So kind of in that sea of all the stuff that we've been talking about, you know, how do we actually get our mind back online? How do we open our mind to more insights and perspectives? How do we shift those patterns? How do we access that wisdom and resourcefulness that we seem to be able to access in some areas and not others? The work gives us a very tangible, self-applicable tool that we can use to identify places that we can see that we're stuck, or that we've had some feedback that we might be stuck and we want to explore it. And actually use this tool to track with specific situations our own thinking, and move us into a space where we can get insights, and actually shift the kind of locked patterns of thinking that we have. In some ways it looks like this very simple set of steps and this very simple tool. And then when you actually get inside your own thinking and use it, not only does it allow you to see some things in a different way, but it actually activates, each of the steps of the work is activating different parts of your mind, bringing some things back online, making different connections by leading you to think in some different ways as you go through the steps. So the structure of it is really valuable, and works with your mind in a particular way. And I love that it's accessible and that it's something that you can do it with a partner, or a coach or a facilitator, but you can also sit down and do it in writing for yourself. And I've sent out the handout for that, and I will show you at the end how you can do it in writing for yourself as well. The structure of the work has two parts to it. These parts are repeating. There's some different little exercises that can fit in the first part, some different entry points. But every time you use the work, it's going to have these two parts to it. The first piece is identifying your own thinking. So it's like identifying what are the thoughts and beliefs that I'm having in my own mind in this situation. And we use specific real situations, just like the stories that we told in the first part of the call. It's not an intellectual process. It's not something that we problem solve from a distance. We actually get right down to the granularity of our own stuck and stressful situations, and we work from it there. Even if there's a bigger pattern of something, the DNA of our own stuck pattern is right there in the moment of real situations where we felt stressed or stuck, or we can see that we behaved or acted in a way that was off for us. It's like in the little circle, there it is. We're behaving and reacting in a certain way. We can just swim upstream to see, what was I believing? If you were to use the work on that third story that you have, you could look at it and say, I was behaving this way. What was I believing when I behaved that way? What was I afraid of? What assumptions did I have? And you can list those out, looking back. And even though it's already over, you can go back and process it with the work to get your learning from it and use it as a chance to put yourself in that pattern and shift to a different pattern. So the first step, identifying what are the beliefs that you're actually having from the limiting beliefs, different types of thinking, using a specific real situation. And we make a list of those beliefs. We actually write them out. And there's some different exercises for that. We're going to do one today. And then we take one belief from that list and we use the 4 questions and turnarounds of the work. They're a repeating set of simple questions to actually inquire into that belief in that specific situation. And it's a reflective process. So the practice is to slow down and reflect and just go through the questions one at a time, be curious and see what answers come to you. I often find there's a tangible piece where I actually have thoughts and insights. And then there's also ways that how I feel about it and what's happening in my body also shifts while I'm doing the work, because it's actually working it in my mind in different ways. So 2 parts, identify and inquire, focusing on a specific situation and writing them down, choosing one, and then moving to the next, and then moving to the inquire step of the work. So we're going to actually work on something now. You can work with the work, you can work on things that happened in the past. You can go back and work on them to look and see what you were thinking and believing. You can also work on future things because our mind locks onto meaning in all directions, past and future. And I often find this is a good entry exercise as practitioners. It's a good place to be able to work with something that's important to us that we're wanting to, that's future oriented, but our limiting beliefs are already active way before we step into the room to host a meeting or design something or join a conversation. Our mind has been there for a long time before we even get there. And if we're able to work with our mind ahead of time, to be more aware of our limiting beliefs ahead of time and work with them, it gives us the opportunity to show up differently. And it also is a place where we can just work with those underlying patterns, because the same patterns will keep repeating themselves in difficult situations. So you kind of get two parts out of it. It helps you with the thing that's coming up, but it also actually helps you get some insight and shift for yourself overall on patterns that you might have. So for this exercise, kind of like working with fear and stressful thoughts about something upcoming. And, in this field of work that we're in, when you think about stepping in to host something or take some leadership around something, entering into a challenging conversation or a collaboration with someone, speaking up, taking some kind of action, any kind of situation that's real for you, that could be a situation you could work with today. And you can, it could be something that you share or don't share. It'll be great if it's something you can share some little parts of. But just think of something that feels like you want to step into it or do it, or it feels important to you to step into it, do it. And either you're just feeling stressed about it, you're avoiding it, you're feeling like you're afraid to do it, and kind of feel that sense of contraction for yourself. And we're just going to write it as one sentence. So my situation that I chose working for today is I want to invite this particular person, or it feels important to me to invite this particular person to collaborate with me on a project. And it's a very outspoken person that I feel a little intimidated by, and that is quite different from me. And I noticed that part of me thinks it would be important to invite her in and collaborate with her, and part of me is feeling intimidated and resistant. And so it's like, oh, that's going to be a good place for me to do the work. Something's going on there that's not clear for me about this person, even though I think they've got a valuable perspective to bring. So that's for my situation. I'm writing that down. It's important to me to invite her to collaborate on this project. And then I'm just going to let myself sit with the tension of that. So if you just want to take, a couple minutes now to think of your situation, something you want to do or it's important for you to do, if it's a collaboration or an action, or it can even be stepping back on something and letting go of control. But be as specific as you can. A specific person, a specific situation. And then just like we did with the story, let yourself picture it and kind of feel the stressful feeling of it. And just that one sentence can kind of tag the situation for you. So anybody game to just share their sentence? You can take names out of it if you want. I want to, or it's important to me to.
I can share.
Thank you.
I want to heal and resolve a breakdown with a group of people that I care a lot about.
Yeah, so you want to enter into some kind of conversation about that, or you want to step into that in some way. Would that be correct? Yep. Thank you. Yeah, and can you feel the stress around it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else? Their one sentence.
Hi, this is Patty. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I could share mine.
Thanks.
It is important for me to give feedback to a certain someone on a presentation that we have that has some areas for improvement.
Thank you. Yeah, and you can feel whatever the hesitation or stress or avoidance is there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This exercise is so great for that also, right? A lot of like having an honest conversation about a thing.
Yes.
You know, how often we're not able to do that or not able to do that well.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody have your sentence, let yourself lean into the feeling of stress around it, because we're going to listen to the thoughts and beliefs that come from that stressful feeling. You know, often, I think particularly in our North American culture, everything is so focused on positivity that we can really like reframe things too quickly, or we can just tell ourselves we should think positive about something, and we don't take time to actually allow and work with the stressful or negative thoughts that we're having. And so in this practice, we're actually like, we will end up back in a forward-looking positive territory, but we're actually taking time to look at that side of our mind. Everybody's got all kinds of thinking going, and everybody's got limiting beliefs going. Minds generate them. And so we're actually taking some time uncensored to look at that. So from that stressful place, in a moment, I'm just going to invite you to write down all the fears and stressful thoughts that come up for you when you think about doing that thing. Your mind will say, if I do this, then this is what's going to happen. And it's going to offer you a whole bunch of thoughts that come from the stressful territory. And I'm going to read you mine that I wrote just before the call, you know, uncensored. So please don't try to positive airbrush your thoughts at this point. The more raw you can be about it and just see what's going on in your mind, the better. So mine was, if I invite this person to collaborate with me on this project, she will make me look bad. She will make people uncomfortable. She will criticize me. She will behave weirdly. She will derail the process. She will make it too slow. She won't stay with the plan. She will talk too much. It will go badly. People will blame me. I won't know what to do. It will be horribly embarrassing. People won't trust me anymore. People think I'm weird. So just like I'm just letting it fly, right? This is like just letting anything that comes up in your mind there uncensored. And so I'm just going to invite you to do that now. So when you think about doing this thing and you tap into the stressful side of it, uncensored, what are the stressful thoughts and fears that come to mind? And just write them down for yourself. What are you afraid will happen? What are your stressful thoughts? Uncensored. Just so you can have a look.
Caitlin?
Yes.
I have one question. I'm kind of struggling with the last slide frame where it says I want, or because it's kind of, it's not like the sentence to me isn't about what I want. It's me wanting to drop out of something.
Right. So it could be, it's important to me to step out of this thing.
Okay. And then when I think that thought about stepping out.
Yeah. If
up.
I step out, what are you afraid will happen? What are your stressful thoughts about stepping out?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just like practicing listening into that part of your mind. Don't be positive or wise yet. You get to do that later. Can be thoughts about the other person, about what other people will think, what will happen. Can be thoughts about yourself. Just watch your mind roam around those territories and just any stressful thoughts or fears that come to mind. So anybody game to share their list or part of their list? Just like without any explanation, just like, wow, look at what my mind is saying about this. These are some thoughts and beliefs that are going on in the background there, or the foreground perhaps.
Hi, this is Patty again. I can share my list.
Thanks, Patty.
If I give feedback, this person will be uncomfortable. It'll hurt their feelings. It might ruin a relationship. It might come across the wrong way. Those are just the things that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you. And I often find when I'm making the fear stressful thought list, if you might notice that the words might comes onto our lists a bit.
Yeah.
And usually you can leave it as might if you want to, but I often find the stressful side of might, you know, if I think they might be hurt, the stressful side of that is that they will be hurt.
Yeah.
You know, the might is kind of made up of will and won't. And so I just write it however it comes to my mind. And then often if I choose that one to work with, then I just go to the most stressful part of that is the fear that they will be hurt, or their fear that I'll say the wrong thing, or the fear that, it will, you know, whatever that is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else game to share your list? Anybody else got any stressful thoughts?
I can go. Sorry, I have a little puppy and he's being unruly right now, so I had to turn myself off. So I'm just thinking about like I'm gonna mess up. It's gonna work. I'm not gonna say it right. I'll say the wrong things. I'm gonna be confusing to people, which is not, you know, at all what you would want. Like you want things to make sense. Anyway, those are just a couple.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's interesting. Sometimes our list will be mostly focused on ourselves. Sometimes it focuses on other things. You know, but for each of you, as you look at those beliefs, you can probably feel the connection between those beliefs, the emotions, and how you're reacting, right? If I'm believing that whole list of things, the chance that I'm going to be able to step into that situation in a really open, present way is just limited. And the more that I'm caught in it, the more I'm attached to it, the more limited it is. And then I'm going to have some probably my own set of not so helpful patterns that will flow out of that. You know, that's why the belief is limiting to me. It limits my ability to think clearly. It limits how I show up. It limits the outcome because I'm limited heading into it. And then, of course, how I show up affects other people, and then they've got their own little, you know, complex system going, and, you know, away we go. So as the last step of this first piece of the work, we just choose one belief. So if you want to just write your belief that you choose as a little if-then statement, you know, with the future beliefs, our mind is always saying, if you do this, then this is what's going to happen. Got a little program for that, right? Its job is to predict and then keep you safe. But you just look to see what is the belief that you're having there. So my example was, if I collaborate with this person, she will make me look bad. That's the one I'm gonna work with. So you want to just choose one and write it down for yourself in that way. have a look at your belief. There isn't only one right one. You could pick any one. But I usually say just have a scan, see which one feels like it catches your attention or feels particularly stressful. In this case, this is a belief about the other person. You know, Sue, it could be a belief about yourself. You had some on your list for anybody. Could be about what I think will happen. So everybody got one? Does anybody have any questions about the list or about identifying the belief? Yeah, so we're just in this series of steps that's like always the same with the work. You're finding a specific situation to work with, and you're either going to choose a situation where you just notice you feel stressed and you want to work on it because it's going to help you feel less stressed and be less limited. Or you can also pick a pattern where you say, you know, I know that I'm, like in this case, I could be saying, I know I'm excluding some people, and I know I've like a big block of unawareness about where I'm doing that and how I'm doing it. And I kind of want to take some responsibility to work on that. So I'm looking around for a situation where I'm having the impulse to exclude somebody who actually has some important perspective. Oh, look, here's a situation for me. So I'm going to pick it and work on it because it gives me a way to get at that pattern. So whatever that is, you pick a situation. In this case, it's a future one. So we're writing down our fears and stressful thoughts about what will happen. And then we choose one belief. That's like the repeating pattern of the exercise. And then we take that one belief into the second step of the work, right? We had identify and then inquire. And then we use the 4 questions and turnarounds of the work to inquire into that belief. And I'm going to, I think what I'll do is walk you through my belief using the work, and you can see how the questions work and how the turnarounds work. And then at the end of the call, I'm going to show you how you can do the one that you've written down in writing. So if you want to put your situation and your belief just off to the side for a moment, and you can kind of track mine with me to see how the work works, then we'll come back around at the end and I'll set you up to be able to do your own belief as a written inquiry exercise. We're going to work with mine. So the second step of the work is to inquire using the structure of what are called the 4 questions and turnarounds of the work. I've sent you out a handout that has the questions on it that you can use with another person or you can use in writing. I also have cards that I use for it. And the 4 questions and turnarounds for the work, the structure of that is always the same. The types of answers that come to you are going to be different with different inquiries, but the repeating structure is really important. In some different kinds of, self-hosting or reflection exercises, they're a little bit more wide open and people might be repeating things back and asking, whatever questions come to you. The work, it's really important that you stay with these questions. It's actually working your mind in some important and different ways, that you do each of these questions and that you reflect on them in order. There's some of whatever the magic of how this works with our mind is built into the structure there. And so you're going to hold the specific situation in mind, the belief that you've chosen to work with, and invite yourself into a compassionate, reflective space. Be curious, and then go through each of the questions, reflecting and either answering out loud or in writing, depending on whether you're doing it with a facilitator or in person in writing. I'm going to tell you what the 4 questions of the work are, but I'm just going to do that quickly because I'm going to walk you through with my example. So on the first side of the first of the part of the work, the 4 questions, with that belief in mind, the first 2 questions, you only answer yes or no. Often your mind will wrestle in different ways, but what about this or what about that? The actual exercise of challenging your mind to either a yes or no answer is really valuable. When our mind has decided that something is 100% true, it doesn't send very many resources to it. There's whole parts of our mind that don't even come online if our mind has assumed that the thing is true. And so even if you end up, regardless of whether you answer yes or no to these first two questions, really reflecting on the belief and looking to see whether it's true or not in that situation and challenging yourself to a yes or no answer begins the process of changing your thinking, and opening your thinking up to more possibilities and putting your mind in a setting that allows it to be curious, open, creative, look at different perspectives. Our mind is not always on that setting. And when we're afraid about something, or we're entrenched in a certain belief, or we have an unconscious assumption about something, it gets very locked into that one perspective view. It doesn't get curious. It doesn't do the big picture thing. So, as we open with these first two questions, regardless what your answer is, taking time to really reflect, look at the belief in the situation, and answer that question for yourself. It's like a really valuable opening of your mind. The third question is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And this gives you an opportunity to really observe yourself in kind of like we did when we were sharing the stories, but in a much more focused and detailed way. And you're linking it to the thought. So your mind is able to see, when I'm believing this thought, what's happening in my emotions, what sensations are showing up in my body, what other connections is my mind making, what movies is it playing, how does that affect how I act towards other people and myself, how does that limit me, why might I be attached to it, what's the payoff. You can spend anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour really reflecting on that piece. It's like a deep self-awareness, and your mind is actually able to see the pattern of the belief when you do that. The fourth question is, who would you be in that same situation without that thought? So you look at the belief and the situation and you imagine it again. You've already imagined it the first time, because it's a future thing. So we don't even know what's going to happen, but we've imagined it and we've been able to see what happens when we're believing the thought. Then in the fourth question, we really look to see, who would I be in the same situation without that thought? And I really encourage you to allow this fourth question to be an experiential question. Not what would I do without the thought, not kind of like from a distance, what might that be like, but allow yourself to picture the situation again and notice how it would feel different if you weren't believing that thought. And then wait to see what your mind notices when it's not looking through the lens of that thought. The power of that question is not just in what you see, but actually giving your system a chance to feel and get a reference for you without the thought. So those are the first four questions of the work. And then we do something called the turnarounds, which give us a way to open our mind to different perspectives on the same situation. When we're operating from a limited mindset and from a place of fear, our mind really likes to lock onto one perspective and be right about that. It's one of the things that just, I think, when we think about systems change, like we can just see that all around us, everybody locked into and protecting one perspective. And really what we know about complexity is there's multiple perspectives happening, all at once, and that we actually can't work on those issues if we can't hold multiple perspectives. And yet, as soon as we feel fear and uncertainty, we tend to lock into a single perspective. And so the purpose of the turnarounds is to actually exercise your mind right in that situation to allow it to hold some different perspectives. And then from that place, you get often helpful insights, and you get the opportunity to learn, take some responsibility. Sometimes there's some uncomfortable self-seeing, in those moments. But I really encourage people to practice taking that as a kind of empowering self-responsibility. Where can I see and take responsibility for how I'm showing up? It's coming out of this belief. It's not because I'm a bad person, but where can I see that and take responsibility for it, as opposed to seeing it as self-blame. It's not about saying, oh, it's all my fault, or this means it's all about me. It really gives me a chance to say, this is a complex thing. There's multiple pieces at play. And if there's ways that I'm contributing to it unconsciously that are not aligned for me, I want to see what that is so that I can shift it. and the turnarounds give us a way to do that. I am going to, I think just for like to give a, you know, like a nice clear example of going through the questions, I think what I'll do is I'm going to facilitate myself on that belief that I was working with, but I want to encourage you to think of us, you can kind of track along with me. So, so it doesn't end up being a spectator sport, you know, what's going on over there for Caitlin. But to think for yourself, where have you been in a situation, or where might you be in a situation where you feel hesitant or stressed about collaborating with someone who's different from you because you think they're going to make you look bad, right? They're very vulnerable to stand up and lead and host in front of a bunch of people, right? And so often in the vulnerability of that, our self-protective stuff comes up more, and all this kind of thinking gets busy, and, you know, it can get really limiting. And so as you track along with me, you can do the work in your head a bit. You can answer the questions with me. I'm going to ask myself the questions here. Da-da-da. Let's see. There we go. And you can listen to my answers and think of your own situation. So take a moment. We'll come back to your original situation, and I'll show you how to do the work on that in writing as an exercise for yourself at the end. But for this situation now, see if you can just tune in to anywhere that that belief is true for you, that somebody's going to make you look bad if you invite them in or work with them. Could even be a participant, you know, collaborative participatory things. We're constantly scanning who we're going to invite and who we're not going to invite. And we don't want anybody to make us look bad, right? So anywhere that that's active for you. And then I'm going to ask myself the questions. I'll answer out loud, and you can answer in your own mind about your situation. So what I'm doing is I'm picturing this person. I'm picturing the situation that I'm thinking of inviting them in to collaborate with me. And then I'm finding the feeling of this belief. I'm finding that thought in my mind. Even though I don't like it, I don't like that I have that thought. I would like to have a more positive thought, but I'm not jumping to that. I'm really letting myself lean into this belief, you know, that she's going to make me look bad. I'm focusing there, and I'm going to ask the question. So the first question is, she's going to make me look bad if I invite her in. Is that true? So I'm looking and reflecting. You can think about yours. I'm like scanning. Is that true? I'm going to say yes. So now I go to the second question. Can I absolutely know it's true she's going to make me look bad? And I noticed that my first answer was like really caught up with my feelings about it. And when I go to the second question, can I absolutely know it's true? I'm really challenging myself to like scan more widely, to look at it from some different angles. And I absolutely know it's true that that's what's going to happen. She's going to make me look bad. Is there any crack in my theory? So I'm going to say no. Right? So is that true? I came up with a yes, that was honest for me. Can I absolutely know it's true when I look closer and look for any crack in the theory? Can I absolutely know it's true? No. And I just let that answer settle. Third question, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? So how do I react? What happens when I believe she's going to make me look bad? And I'm checking now to see what's happening for me when I believe that. What emotions are showing up for me? So I notice I feel stressed. I feel anxious. I feel a bit sweaty. I notice my mouth gets kind of dry. My throat is like getting a little tight, and I feel agitated. What images come to mind? I have like an image of another meeting I was at with her where she was really challenging people on lots of different things in a loud voice, and I felt really uncomfortable. I have an image of her like laughing really loudly in the middle of something, and I'm imagining that happening in the middle of our work that I'm wanting to bring her into, and now I'm just like, my mind is jumbling. So I've got those kind of images going. people staring at me, the meeting not going very well. I've got like quite a lot of movies running. How do I treat her when I'm believing this thought? Right? These are all little sub questions of how do I act? How do I react when I believe this thought? So how do I show up with her? How do I treat her when I believe she's going to make me look bad? You can be thinking about your person in your mind. How do you treat that person? I notice I get kind of superficial with her. I don't invite her into stuff as much. I know I'm hesitating about this particular situation. I avoid her some. I don't reply to her emails as quickly as I reply to other people's emails. I notice I'm awkward around her. So I'm just watching through the lens of this belief. What are some of the ways that I treat her, or some of the behaviors that are coming through this belief? And I can look and see, how do I treat myself when it feels important to me to collaborate with her, but then I'm telling myself that she's going to make me look bad. How am I treating myself? So I notice I'm scaring myself. It's like I'm only watching like movies that make me uncomfortable. I'm creating stress for myself because I keep running it over and over in my mind. Another way I'm treating myself is like not really aligned. Like I feel pretty clear about the important reasons to invite her into this. And so of like not doing it because of my own fear beliefs, and this particular one of like trying to not look bad, kind of taking myself out of my integrity doesn't feel very good. It's like a way of treating myself, right? I'm not doing it on purpose. It doesn't mean I'm treating myself this way on purpose. I'm just looking to see, how do I end up treating myself when I'm really locked into this belief? I'm just looking to see any of the other little sub questions here. I could look at like, what's the payoff for me? Certainly, I have the payoff of trying to keep myself more comfortable. And then what does it stop you from being able to do? So when you think about the thing you're wanting to step into, for me, wanting to like co-create and invite different people in, what does it stop me from being able to do? Stops me from being able to be aligned about that. Stops me from being able to work with this bigger range of people. Stops me from being able to like set up some more challenging situations for the people that I work with and bring in like some challenging voices, you know, beyond what I'm comfortable with. Then I can just look there and see like, what else does it cost me to hold on to this belief? I can like really look closely at that one. And if you're tracking along, you know, when you're operating from the fear that this person's going to make you look bad, what are you not able to do in that situation, right? It's all limiting. You can see in this third question, but this one like really gives you a chance to really look at, how is it limiting me when I operate from this? And you would like speak that out or write it down. The fourth question, I'm kind of shifting gears now. I've had a look at what happens when I'm believing the thought. So the fourth question, I get to kind of shift over, rewind, and look at the same situation and imagine and experience what it would be like if I wasn't believing that thought. So if I wasn't operating from that fearful thought that she's going to make me look bad, and I'm actually going to let myself go and picture it and see what it feels like. I'm imagining the project and the meeting. I'm picturing her. I notice I feel a lot of curiosity. Different things will come through in this space. And I just noticed like actually like a huge amount of curiosity just showed up in me. Like, wow, I wonder what that would be like. It would be like, it would really bring some different energy and some different perspectives into this. I don't know what would happen, but without that thought going, it can feel that curiosity really quite big and a bit of excitement on the edge of it showing up for me. I notice I feel stronger. It still feels uncomfortable, but it doesn't feel not possible. And I notice I'm getting more images of her, of some of her strengths now coming into my mind. I'm not just running the movie of like a couple of times that, you know, I feel judgy about or felt stressed about. I can see some other images of where she's really strong and what's really, what would be really helpful for her, what she can bring that I can't, is like just starting to come back into my mind without that thought. So with whatever your situation is, you can be thinking about who would you be without that thought? What do you notice? Kind of like the difference between story 2 and story 3, different versions of you can show up, right? So you have a chance for that to show itself. Let's see, I'm going to take through. So I'm just going to show you how the turnarounds work with my my example. I put them in the slide ahead of time, but I haven't found examples for them yet. So as we go to turn it around, you're going to take the mechanics of it are that you take the belief sentence. So I have, she will make me look bad. And you actually flip the words around in a number of different ways that are each of the turnarounds. And as you turn it around those ways, you stop and consider, is there any truth from that perspective? Is there any helpful insight from that perspective? And then you find specific real examples that support that, okay? Because there's going to be examples for multiple perspectives. So the way I would turn it around to the opposite, the first way, she will make me look bad. She won't make me look bad, right? So I don't know. It's not about being in denial about the possibility of this first piece, but I'm going to look at it from the perspective of she won't. So she won't make me look bad. And now I'm going to look more fully at her, more fully at the situation. You know, I've got more of my mind online now, and I can look and see, what do I know about her that she might not make me look bad? And part of what's happening in my mind as I turn that around is the whole idea of her making me look bad. And what does that even mean? Is starting to collapse in my mind a little bit. And so I'm looking more at the people that are coming and seeing more resilience, and that they're actually like smart, interesting people that really can handle a bunch of different perspectives. And I'm also noticing that they're not really, I mean, the focus of the meeting is not me. I'm a host. I'm not, it's not everybody coming to see, is Caitlin a good or bad person? The people that are coming are actually interested in the topic. So she won't make me look bad. You know, another kind of insight example that comes in there for me is like, people are going to be focusing on the topic, not on Caitlin, really. So that just gives me a little piece of insight there. So I'm going to go through these ones and maybe talk about a little example for each of them and how they work. I would spend, you know, if I was doing this inquiry fully, I would spend like a good 15 minutes going through these, maybe longer, looking for really specific examples. So another opposite there could be, she will make me look good. And I could look and see there, you know, how could, if I was to collaborate with her, how might that end up actually having a positive effect for how I show up? And I would look and see what are some examples there. You know, she jokes a lot. That's something I noticed about her, and I have a sense of humor and I like joking a lot. And so it's like, oh, I could actually see where we could have some chemistry there in a tough topic, how actually our humor could actually play quite well together. That would be like a way she could make me look good, or we would just look good together. So that's an interesting piece that is like new to my mind. I couldn't see that when I was sitting in the fear-based belief space. So then I would sit here and find some more specific examples. The way that I would turn it around to what's called the other is where is how I'm, you know, what I'm afraid the person's going to do to me, you know, where is it that I might be doing that to them? And so in this example, these two tend to be a little more humble pie area, or just like really looking at myself. You know, where am I making her look bad? Right? I'm so worried about me making me look bad. Where am I making her look bad? You know, and I can certainly see where I'm making her look bad in my head. I'm only playing the movies of things that I feel critical about with her. You know, when I was in the belief, those are the only movies I'm making. So I'm making her look bad to me. And then also I could be making her look bad, you know, to the community or to other people when I don't invite her in, you know, or if I don't allow her to have some voice, or if I show up in a way that is defensive when she's there. Or probably if I was operating out of this, you know, I might try to take more control or shut her down in some way. And those would be behaviors I wouldn't want to have, but could come out of that belief. So I would look closely to see what are some ways that I'm acting that could actually make her look bad. And then the turnaround to the self is where am I doing to myself the thing that I'm worried is going to happen from the other person, or that I think the other person is doing. So looking to see, where am I making myself look bad? Where am I doing that? And it's really important with this one, you know, actually with these two, that it's not like a na 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 kind of like blamey pointy thing. It's really just like, if I'm making someone look bad, that's not aligned for my values. I want to know so that I can shift that. That's part of what's going on. I want to take responsibility for it. If I'm making myself look bad, that feels awful and it's not what I want. So it's not blaming myself. It's just looking to see really closely, get out my magnifying glass. Where am I doing that? And if I can see it specifically, right, finding the specific examples is really important. If I can see that in a specific example kind of way, then I can learn from it and shift it. And so I'm empowered in both of these turnarounds, even though they can be uncomfortable because it's, you know, I'm not showing up how I want to. It can be very empowering, like humbling but empowering kind of space if you hold it that way. So with each of these turnarounds, I'm just looking at it from this angle, then this angle, then this angle, sitting with where could that be true? Is there any valuable insight from that perspective? Finding specific examples. With this exercise, it's not the case with the other exercises of the work that are working with present things or judgments. But this one, sometimes there's an extra opposite where you can turn the first part around. So then I could also look like, if I don't collaborate with her, she will make me look bad. Or if I don't collaborate with her, I will look bad. And so you can just look and see, you know, sometimes we're so busy trying to avoid the thing, we don't realize that if we don't take the action, you know, it could happen also. And so then I'd look and see, you know, certainly if I don't collaborate with her, I'm going to look bad to myself because it's not aligned for me. You know, so that might be a place I would look for it. So you can find some examples, you know, for that one as well. Sometimes this turnaround works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's kind of the bonus one with this exercise. And each of these steps is on the handout that I sent you. You know, I'm moving through a little bit quickly now because I want a bit of a chance for us to check in around it at the end. But that handout of the fear stuck exercise takes you through this whole exercise and shows you how to do the turnarounds on the back there as well. So I would be taking reflective time with each of those. When you come to the end of the work, it's working your mind. It's not a linear problem solving process. So it's really important you just give yourself, or if you're working with someone, a partner, a little bit of space for reflection and integration at the end. It can be incredibly tempting to jump on it and give the person advice, or to jump on it and try to analyze it. But then you fill the working space. Your mind is now like shifting into a different mindset. Often you do the work on something, and in the days and hours following, you'll get more insights. You start to think about it differently. There's a lot of work happening behind the scenes in your mind in a kind of complex way. And you don't want to just pile advice and problem solving on that. So would love to, I know we're starting to come closer to the end of our time, but I wanted to just give a chance for, you know, any questions and maybe just a little reflection if we've got 5 minutes, you know, here at the end to just like hear from you in your own reflection about these stories and the process. You know, how do you see that working on your own limiting beliefs could be helpful in the kind of systems change work we're doing? I could wax on about it for a long time more. I find it so interesting and powerful, but it'd just be interesting to hear your thoughts and your reflections. How do you see this kind of granular piece of working with our own limiting beliefs? How do you see that scaling out to, you know, how we show up in, you know, in our teams or in our communities or in the systems that we're working in? Why is this important? Why might it be helpful? Any thoughts or questions or reflection about the work piece?
I'm gonna go because I have to step off very, very soon, and I wanna thank you for this great explanation for this very useful tool. This will definitely come in handy because I think as systems change agents, we need to be as clean as possible. And that means doing our own work to not generate noise. And I was doing a lot of using the nonviolent communication framework a lot with the emotions and the needs. But I think this goes one step before emotions because emotions are a result of beliefs. So this is a welcome framework for my own processing. And you explained it in a crystal clear way, and I expect to be using it a lot from now on. So thank you so much, Caitlin.
Oh, you're so welcome. Yeah, and it works beautifully in pairing with the nonviolent communication. I find I did a bunch of that also, and I find it fills a piece in and they work really well together. So be curious to hear how that goes for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any thoughts or questions?
I just want to thank you, Caitlin, for, you know, sharing this work with us and for vulnerably sharing your own experience that I think, you know I could relate to. So thank you so much for all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm very much struck by, first of all, I love it, right? But just how your mind can do this stuff to you. I'm just thinking Dana and I were in Atlanta, what day it was, I don't know, this week. And something happened to me that morning and I just kind of like froze. And Dana's like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I think, you know, I'll have to kind of unpack it because I've been thinking about it, about probably my own beliefs, right? About, you know, what I can do or not do. And it just like, and I was very tired. It was just like this mixture. Anyway, so it's helpful to have a framework, mm-hmm. And it's kind of scary what happens, your mind does to you, right? So,
yeah. And it's you know, it's just true for all of us. I think there's a piece of it where, I mean, it is vulnerable personal work, but being able to see that this is part of how human minds work. And so if we can take the shame off of it and be able to say, you know, this happened, so how can we work with it? Then it allows us to take responsibility without, you know, blame and shame, and gives you a way to do that. You could take that situation that happened, look at that little diagram that I had, you know, and say, okay, that freezing happened and a bunch of emotions were happening. And you can go back into the movie. You know, it's amazing. We have this like inner YouTube channel that actually like keeps a lot of footage. You can go back and look and say, you know, when this hit me, look at the situation. What was I thinking and believing? You know, what was the fear I had or the stressful thought? Or was I judging someone or myself? What was I thinking is not possible? And you can write it out and then hold that situation in mind and take yourself through the questions. Yeah. Yeah, I'm so massively grateful for this practice. I use it all the time. You know, but it's very disempowering to have things like that happen and just feel at the mercy of it. But if you do have a way to say, okay, that happens, and now what can I do with it? And here's a very tangible thing I can do with it. It's very powerful. Yeah. Okay. So what I thought I'd do, since we're recording, I know we're a couple minutes over, but if I can just go through the last couple slides to show people how to do the writing and what the resources are. If anybody needs to sign off, they can sign off, but then we have a complete recording and people can find the resources. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Caitlin, I do also have another call, so I'm gonna leave you to do that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's totally
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Thank
All
you.
right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so just in terms of using the practice of the work, you can do it with another person where somebody asks you the questions and you reflect and answer. It is still a self-hosting process. And so it's really important that whoever's facilitating that is only asking the questions and not filling the space with their own comments or advice or conversation. You really want to hold the structure, but you can do it that way with another person, or you can do it as a written self-facilitation exercise. And so in that space, you'll see on one of the handouts that I sent out, it just says the self-facilitation guide. You do the first part of the exercise, identify the situation and your thoughts and beliefs, choose the one belief, and then you can just write that belief at the top of the page. You know, in my case, you know, she's going to make me look bad. And then go through the questions one at a time on the sheet. And so you'll see on the sheet, it says, is that true? Second question, can you absolutely know that that's true? How do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? And it's got the little sub questions down the side. It's just important when you're doing the written exercise to be sure that you pause and reflect. It is a reflective exercise. And so you don't want to just be analyzing and outputting. Pause with your pen, go back and look in your mind, reflect, let yourself feel it, notice what you're doing, write some stuff down. And so as long as you're doing like really that reflective piece that you can feel, then you'll get the power of the work in writing. And it's so helpful to have it as a written practice because we have so many limiting beliefs and so many challenging situations that if we have to always wait for a facilitator or someone to work with us, it just, you know, it just means that the reach of the practice or the self-supportiveness of the practice is limited. And so I do encourage, you know, anyone who's been sitting with us when on the recording or here for the exercise today to take that belief from our exercise that we started together, write it at the top of the handout, and then, you know, give yourself half an hour and slow it down and walk yourself all the way through the beliefs, turn them around, see what you find, and then let yourself sit with it. It is not a problem-solving exercise. And so you're not necessarily, I mean, we're very, I think, particularly in, you know, North American Western culture, we're very problem-solving oriented. That is a mindset. It's a limiting one for systems change and self-change. And so you're not going to necessarily get a solution shooting out the other side of this. But you might notice you feel different about it, you have some insights, and your mind starts to work it differently. That's it. Sometimes the insights are huge aha kind of insights, and sometimes they're quieter, and you might find that it might not even feel like a lot happened. And then when you're in the situation again, you notice that you're more resourceful or something feels or reacts differently. So just giving yourself space for that. There's a couple of handout guides that I sent that you can use. Resource-wise, I have resources on my website. There's a longer online program through Beehive Productions that's going to happen early in the new year, 4 sessions, so that we can look at how we work with fears, how do we work with judgment and bias, you know, how do we work with fear of failure, what are some of, we're going to work with a number of different patterns. There's other things there. You're welcome to help yourself to resources there, and got some blog posts and different things. The work that we're using here today with the limiting beliefs is based on the work of Byron Katie. She has a number of different books. She has a website, thework.com. She offers, you know, all kinds of stuff. Some of the way that I've offered the work today is adapted from the way that she offers the work. I've connected it to system change and complexity work. You know, looking at some of the sub-questions and some of the exercises are exercises that I've taken the structure of the work that she uses and adapted them in some different ways. But you can find the source of the work and some good stuff there with her as well. And there is actually an app put out by Byron Katie. Of course there's an app. There's an app for everything. But where you can just type your belief in and then it'll pop doesn't have all the sub questions I shared here, but it'll pop the questions up for you, and you can answer them. And I think what I love about that is making rigorous personal practice part of our daily lives, that it's not something that we go sit in a cave and do once every 10 years. We like kind of can't afford that, probably financially, but also just in terms of what's called for. And so having something where I can sit on the ferry or the subway, or while I'm waiting to pick my kids up from swimming lessons, or in the car before I go to a meeting, you know, or at my desk, or whatever that is, where we can just like actually build the practice into our lives, I think makes it powerful. And
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
So
$1.49. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
But I think
Okay.
how much I've used it. So yeah, so I think
Good.
I think that brings us to the end of our time.
Great.
And,
This was great. So I printed out all of the information, and I think we'll make those available, and thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. And I hope you guys can use the recording. I know,
Yeah,
I know a lot of the time for people to have 2 hours in the middle of a work day is
it's hard. Yeah. Oh yeah, I think it'll be accessed, right? And so
yeah,
I'll send it out too.
yeah,
So
good. I tried to do it with the slides in a way that would work well on a recording.
it was
So
great. Yeah.
good. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye-bye.